I discovered my parents were secretly forging documents to steal my grandpa's land and sell it to fund my sister's college. So I gathered proof and exposed everything before the sale went through. I 17 male grew up basically invisible in my own house. Not the cool ghost type that people just ignore, the kind nobody gives a thought about. For real. 17 years and I felt like some random roommate they got stuck with. My parents had their perfect child, my sister 19 female. Straight A's, goes to some fancy law school that costs a ton of money, and my parents made sure she got everything new. iPhone every year, expensive clothes, even a brand new Jeep for her 18th birthday. Me. If I wanted anything at all, I had to work my ass off for it. Been working since I was 15, stocking shelves at the grocery store, making sandwiches at this local deli. Not because I wanted anything fancy, but because if I didn't buy my own stuff, I'd still be wearing the same crappy jeans from middle school. That's not exaggerating. My growth spurt hit and my parents were like, figure it out yourself, while my sister got a whole new wardrobe. Every time I asked for literally anything, my parents had one answer. We need to focus on your sister's future. It wasn't just money either. When she had a bad day, everyone had to be super careful not to upset her. If I had a bad day, nobody even noticed. I could come home looking like I just returned from Mars, and my mom would just ask if I remembered to pick up milk. My sister got to choose where we ate, what we watched, everything. My opinion meant exactly nothing in that house. The favoritism was so obvious it was almost funny. Like my sister would get sick and suddenly my mom was making homemade soup and buying special tissues. I got sick once and my mom left cold medicine outside my door and told me not to spread my germs. Thanks for the love, Mom. Dinner conversations were the worst. It was all, tell us about your day, to my sister who would talk for like 40 minutes about some drama with her friends or a hard test. Then maybe if I was lucky, someone would remember I existed and ask, how was your day? But they'd already be clearing the table or checking their phones. The car thing really killed me though. She got a brand new Jeep for her 18th birthday, this huge surprise with a bow on it in the driveway and everything. My dad made this big speech about how proud they were and how she deserved it for being such a great student. My 18th birthday, I got a cake from the grocery store and a card with $50 in it. Dad said if I wanted a car, I could save up for one. The difference in treatment was so blatant it was almost impressive. I started picking up more and more hours at work just to stay away from home. My manager at the deli was more interested in my life than my own parents. Pretty sad when the guy who pays you minimum wage to make sandwiches asks more questions about your future than your family. It wasn't like my parents were monsters or anything. They didn't hit me or scream at me or any of that. They just didn't care. Like I was some random guy who happened to live there, not their son. Sometimes I think that's almost worse in a way. At least if they were awful, I could be mad. Instead, I was just nothing. So yeah, that was my life for 17 years, existing in the shadow of the golden child, trying to convince myself it wouldn't always be like this, that someday I'd matter to someone. College applications rolled around senior year, and I wasn't completely stupid. I knew we weren't loaded with cash. I wasn't trying to go to some Ivy League school or anything crazy, just a decent state college about an hour away. Nothing fancy, reasonable tuition, good enough programs. I brought it up at dinner one night, figured I'd test the waters and see if maybe my parents might help me out a little like they were doing for my sister. Man, was that a mistake. I still remember exactly how it went down. We were having dinner. I waited till everyone was settled and said, so I've been looking at state for next fall. Application fee is only like $50. My parents looked at each other with this weird expression like they were having some telepathic conversation about how to shut me down. Then Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. Your sister's education is an investment. If you want college, you'll need to work more hours and get loans. Time to figure it out on your own. Mom nodded along like this made perfect sense. We just can't afford to send both of you right now. Your sister's program is very expensive. Then came the real business. Dad put down his fork and looked at me all serious. Actually, now that you're almost 18, we think it's time you started contributing to the household. Rent and utilities, prepare you for the real world. I nearly choked. You want me to pay rent here? In my own house? It's our house, Mom corrected. And money is tight right now. Money is tight. That was hilarious. Didn't seem tight when my sister wanted to go to Boston for the weekend to tour law firms, aka a party with her friends. Money was only tight when it came to me. But when my sister needed a new laptop for her law school studies, they made it happen without question while I had to pay to live in my own house or get out. That night, I just kept trying to picture my future in this place, working my ass off at the deli, giving half my money to my parents, watching my sister live her best life while I just existed. It made me sick thinking about it. I started doing the math in my head. Rent in our area was insane. No way I could afford my own place on deli wages. Roommates maybe, but who? All my friends were going to college with their parents' support. The next morning at breakfast was even worse. I barely got 2 bites of my cereal before Mom reminded me I owed for last month's internet bill. Don't forget, we need that by Friday, like I was some tenant she was chasing down for payment. Then my sister walked in half asleep, grabbed her special organic smoothie from the fridge, because of course she had special food just for her, and nobody said a word about her paying for anything. She hadn't worked a day in her life, but somehow I was the financial burden. I couldn't help myself. So why isn't she paying anything? Mom looked at me like I was speaking another language. She's focused on her studies, she said with this tone like I was being ridiculous. You should be grateful you even have a roof over your head. Grateful for being treated like a tenant in my own house, for having to work 30 hours a week on top of school just to buy basics while my sister got everything handed to her. Yeah, super grateful over here. Then there was Dad. Found him one night in his office staring at the water bill, looking stressed. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, then turned to me standing in the doorway. You know, kiddo, every little bit helps. I wanted to tell him every little bit had already gone toward my sister's fancy life, but kept my mouth shut. That's how things worked in that house. Keep your head down, don't make waves, accept that you're less important. Mom started leaving notes on the fridge, rent due Friday, written with a smiley face like she wasn't shaking down her own kid. Meanwhile, my sister got notes like, good luck on your presentation, sweetie, next to a Visa gift card or Starbucks card or whatever other treat they decided she deserved that day. I started looking for more work. The deli couldn't give me more hours, so I applied at this office building for a night security job. Standing around all night watching empty hallways and checking doors. Boring as hell, but it paid better than the deli, and honestly being alone in an empty building was better than being invisible at home. Between the 2 jobs, I was working almost 50 hours a week while trying to finish high school. I was constantly exhausted. My grades started slipping. Did my parents notice or care? Nope. But my sister got a B+ once, and my mom made her favorite dinner to cheer her up after such a disappointment. The first time I handed over rent money was the worst. I just cashed my check, counted out the cash, put it in an envelope, and gave it to my dad after dinner. He took it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Didn't even say thanks, just nodded and put it in his wallet. I felt like such a sucker. My room didn't even feel like mine anymore. More like a place I was renting that I could get kicked out of at any time. I started keeping most of my stuff packed in my backpack and duffel bag, just in case. Not that I had much worth taking. One night after a double shift, I came home at like 2 a.m. Everyone was asleep. I sat in the kitchen eating cold leftovers, looking around at the house I grew up in, the family photos that I was barely in, the fancy stuff we supposedly couldn't afford, but somehow managed to buy for my sister, the note on the fridge reminding me utilities were due. And I just thought, is this it? Is this really what my life is supposed to be? Working my ass off to stay in a place where nobody wanted me, watching someone else live the life I couldn't have. There had to be something better out there. Anywhere had to be better than this. Through all this, there was only one person who ever made me feel like I wasn't just taking up space. My grandpa. He lived out west on this horse ranch in the middle of nowhere. Not Montana or Wyoming or anything that fancy, just this decent-sized property a few states over. I didn't get to see him much since my parents always had more important things to do than visit him. But when I did, it was like entering a different universe. Grandpa's place wasn't anything special to look at. Old farmhouse that needed paint, some stables, fenced pastures, and about a dozen horses. But darn it, it felt more like home than my actual house ever did. No bias, no constant reminders that I was the lesser child, just open land, fresh air, and actual peace. He had these horses, about a dozen of them. Some were for breeding, others for trail rides. I'd help groom them when I visited, learn how to clean their hooves, brush them down, all that stuff. Hard work that left you sore and smelling like a horse, but I didn't mind. Out there, I wasn't just existing. I was actually doing something that mattered. You know, my grandpa wasn't the touchy-feely type. He didn't give pep talks or tell me I was special. He just treated me like I was capable, like my opinion had value. He'd ask what I thought about stuff and actually listen to my answer. Basic human respect, but it felt revolutionary compared to home. The idea kept growing in my head during those long nights. What if I just left, cut ties, focused on my own future instead of funding the never-ending My Sister Is Amazing show? Stay and be nothing, or leave and try to be something. I started researching GEDs instead of finishing high school, looking into jobs in my grandpa's area, checking bus ticket prices. Just planning, dreaming, really. Then I started feeling weird stuff happening at home. My parents started getting all these official-looking documents in the mail, big envelopes with legal firm names on them. They'd quickly hide them whenever I walked in, started having these hushed conversations that stopped the second I entered the room. Something was definitely up. At first, I thought maybe they were getting divorced or something. That would explain the legal papers and the secrecy. But they weren't fighting more than usual, and they still presented a united front when it came to favoring my sister and treating me like the help. One night, I came home early from my security shift because the building had a power outage from a storm, and they sent everyone home. It was like 1 a.m. instead of my usual 6 a.m. My parents were in the kitchen with a stack of papers talking in low voices. I stopped outside the door when I heard my grandpa's name. He'll never know, my dad was saying. His eyesight is so bad these days he can barely read the newspaper without a magnifying glass. But what if he asks someone else to look at it, my mom asked. She sounded nervous, which was weird for her. He lives alone in the middle of nowhere. By the time anyone figures it out, it'll be too late. The deal will be done. I froze in the hallway. Were they talking about what I thought they were talking about? Something to do with my grandpa that he wouldn't know about? That didn't sound good at all. Dad continued. Look, the developer needs an answer by the end of the month. This is how we guarantee her future. Her tuition's not going to pay itself, and this deal sets her up for life. We owe it to her after everything we've sacrificed. My mom sighed. I just don't want any trouble. Your father worked hard for that land, and now it can work for us. My dad said, all we need is his signature on these papers. I backed away quietly and went to my room, mind racing. They were planning something with my grandpa's ranch, something he wouldn't know about. It didn't take a genius to figure out they were up to no good. Over the next few weeks, I started paying close attention. My parents were acting strange, whispering, hiding mail, taking random day trips they wouldn't explain. My sister seemed in on it too, suddenly asking about Grandpa's health and property out of concern. I started snooping. Yeah, I know, invasion of privacy and all that, but something felt seriously wrong. I checked the mail before they got home whenever I could, looking for clues. Started listening at doors like some spy movie character. Even checked their browser history on the family computer when they weren't around. One day, while they were out at my sister's debate tournament, I searched their home office. Probably wrong, but I was way past caring at that point. Hidden in Dad's desk drawer, I found copies of what looked like legal documents. Property transfers, power of attorney forms, and what looked like a new will for my grandpa, all dated recently. I'm no lawyer, but even I could tell this was sketchy as hell. The documents basically transferred ownership of the ranch to my parents. There were sticky notes on some pages saying signature needed here with little arrows. And yeah, there was my grandpa's signature on some already, but something was off about it. I'd seen his handwriting on birthday cards. This wasn't quite right. I took photos of everything with my phone and put it all back exactly how I found it. That night, I researched what the documents meant. They were trying to transfer Grandpa's ranch into their names. The signatures looked like Grandpa's, but they were forgeries. My parents were actually committing fraud, like real criminal fraud. I called this kid I knew from school whose dad was a lawyer. Didn't tell him details, just asked hypothetical questions about forged documents and property transfers. What he told me confirmed my suspicions. My parents were trying to steal Grandpa's ranch through forged paperwork. But why now? After some digging online, I found out why the sudden rush. A developer was buying up land in Grandpa's area for some resort project. His ranch had suddenly become worth serious money. My parents must have caught wind of this somehow. I was beyond pissed, but I knew I couldn't just confront them. They'd deny everything, destroy the evidence, and I'd have no proof. I needed to be smart about this. Instead of confronting them, I started casually mentioning Grandpa more often. Wonder how Grandpa's doing with those horses, I'd say, watching their reactions. Every time they'd exchange this guilty look before changing the subject. I also noticed other weird stuff, like my dad practicing Grandpa's signature on scrap paper. Caught him once and he quickly crumpled it up, saying he was just doodling. Sure, Dad, just randomly doodling your father's signature. Totally normal. The more I discovered, the more I realized I needed to warn my grandpa. But I had to be careful. If my parents suspected, I knew they might speed up their plan. So I played dumb, acted normal, all while trying to figure out how to stop them. Then they dropped this on me. We were all going to visit Grandpa soon. A family trip. This was weird because they never wanted to go there before. Now they were insistent that we all go, including my sister, who normally complained about the smell and nothing to do at the ranch. This was it. They were going to try to get him to sign those papers in person, and I was the only one who could stop them. The days leading up to our family trip to Grandpa's ranch were nerve-wracking as hell. I felt like I was living in some crappy spy movie, trying to act normal while knowing my parents were planning something seriously messed up. I had to keep reminding myself not to stare at them or act weird. Not easy when you know your folks are literal criminals. I kept collecting evidence. Whenever they weren't home, I'd check their office for new documents. Found a few more papers, including something that looked like a script. Actual talking points for how to convince Grandpa to sign stuff. They'd written out this whole sob story about needing money for my sister's law school and how they were struggling financially. My sister was definitely in on it too. Caught her on the phone with Mom saying, "So I just need to distract him while you guys do the paperwork thing." Dad says if this goes through, law school's covered for the next 2 years, plus maybe a down payment for my apartment. Real nice family I've got, right? Using the golden child as a distraction while they rob Grandpa blind. The night before our trip, I overheard them in their bedroom. "What if he wants to read the papers himself?" Mom asked. "We've been over this," Dad said, sounding annoyed. "I'll tell him it's just routine estate planning stuff that his lawyer recommended. Too complicated to bother with the details. He trusts me." That's when it really hit me how messed up this was. They were using Grandpa's trust against him, his own son planning to steal from him. It made me sick. On the morning we left, they were both super cheerful, like we were going on some awesome vacation instead of a fraud mission. Mom even packed Grandpa's favorite cookies. "Nice touch, right? Here's some cookies while we steal your life's work." The car ride was tense for me, but my parents were chatty, making plans and talking about the great investment opportunity they were considering. My sister kept asking if the ranch had decent cell service. Real concern about the important things in life. I spent the drive looking out the window trying to figure out what to do. I had the evidence on my phone, but would Grandpa believe me over his own son? Would he even understand what was happening? The guy was in his 70s and lived alone. What if he just trusted my dad and signed whatever they put in front of him? When we pulled up to the ranch, Grandpa was waiting on the porch. He looked genuinely happy to see us, which made everything worse. He had no idea what was coming. My parents were acting super nice, helping with chores, praising the ranch, asking about the horses. "The place looks great, Dad," my father said, looking around with what I now recognized as dollar signs in his eyes. My sister even put on boots and pretended to be interested in learning about ranch life. First time ever. It was so fake it made me want to puke. Grandpa showed us around, talking about improvements he'd made and how the horses were doing. He seemed a little confused by all the sudden interest, but happy to have company. He kept glancing at me like he knew something was off. That night after dinner, my parents set the mood, trying to make Grandpa feel comfortable. Real classy move. My sister conveniently started showing Grandpa photos on her phone, pictures from school, her friends, her life in the city. The distraction was beginning. I saw my dad reach for his briefcase. This was it. They were going to do it right now. "Actually," I said, standing up suddenly, "Grandpa, can I show you something with the horses?" I noticed the bay mare was favoring her left front leg. Everyone looked startled. This wasn't part of the script. "Right now," my mom asked, shooting me a look. "It'll just take a minute," I said. "Better check it before it gets dark." Grandpa nodded and got up. "Good eye, kid. Let's take a look." As we walked out to the stables, I could feel my parents' eyes burning into my back. They were pissed but couldn't say anything without seeming suspicious. Once we were alone in the stable, I turned to Grandpa. "There's nothing wrong with any horse." He raised an eyebrow. "Figured as much." "What's going on, kid? You've been jumpy since you got here." I took a deep breath. This was it. Grandpa, Mom, and Dad are trying to scam you. They've got papers in there for you to sign that would transfer ownership of the ranch to them. They're planning to sell it to a developer. His face didn't change much, just a slight tightening around the eyes. "That's a serious accusation. I know, and I have proof." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of the documents. "See these signatures? They're practicing forging your signature. They've got all these papers about property transfers and power of attorney." He studied the photos, scrolling through them slowly. "Why would they do this now? They've never cared about the ranch before." "Because of the resort development," I said. "The land is worth millions now. They want to cash in, pay for my sister's law school, buy a new house, whatever. They don't care about the ranch or the horses or you." He was quiet for a long time, looking at the horses in their stalls. The bay mare nickered softly at him. "You know," he finally said, "I always wondered how you turned out so different from them." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean, decent? Honest?" He looked at me. "You could have gone along with it, Probably would have gotten something out of the deal. I shook my head. That's not who I am. He nodded. No, it's not. He handed my phone back. Thank you for telling me. Let's go back inside. Wait, what are you going to do? I asked, suddenly panicked. Nothing tonight, he said calmly. Tonight we're going to go back in there and act normal. Tomorrow we'll deal with this. Trust me. So that's what we did. Went back inside where my parents had the papers laid out on the dining table ready for their big scam. Grandpa acted like nothing was wrong. Told some stories about the ranch, asked about people back home. My parents were visibly impatient, but trying not to show it. We should discuss those estate planning documents, my dad finally said, gesturing to the papers. Just some routine stuff my lawyer recommended. Tomorrow, Grandpa said firmly. Too tired for paperwork tonight. These old eyes need rest. The look on my parents' faces was priceless. Frustrated, but trying not to push too hard. They had no choice but to agree. The next morning, I found Grandpa in the kitchen. He looked at me and said, I made some calls last night after you went to bed. My lawyer's coming by around 10. So is my brother, your great-uncle Steve. Figure we might need some witnesses. My stomach did this weird flip. This was really happening. What about my parents? What are you going to say to them? Nothing yet. Let them think everything's going according to their plan. He took a sip of his coffee. Your job is to act normal. Can you do that? I nodded, though normal felt pretty impossible at this point. What about my sister? He asked. She's in on it too, I think so. I said. I heard her talking about distracting you while they got the papers signed. Something flashed across his face. Disappointment, maybe. Then she's made her choice too. My parents and sister eventually stumbled into the kitchen looking annoyingly well-rested for people planning a major fraud. Mom immediately started making a big breakfast, talking about how the country air made her sleep so well. Dad kept checking his watch and making comments about getting to business after breakfast. Grandpa played along perfectly, talking about ranch stuff, asking my sister about school, acting completely oblivious. I tried to follow his lead, just eating my eggs and nodding at appropriate times, but it was hard not to stare at my parents and think I know what you're doing. After breakfast, Dad went to get his briefcase, while Mom cleared the table with this fake casual attitude. Maybe we should all sit in the living room, she suggested, more comfortable for going through those papers. Grandpa agreed, and we all moved to the living room. Dad laid out the documents on the coffee table, putting on his serious business face. Now, Dad, these are just standard estate planning documents that my lawyer drew up. Nothing complicated, just making sure everything's properly arranged for the future. Grandpa picked up the first document, squinting at it like he could barely read it. What's this part about property transfer? Dad launched into this rehearsed explanation about asset protection and liability concerns, using a bunch of legal-sounding terms that probably didn't mean what he thought they meant. I had to bite my tongue to keep from calling him out right there. That's when we heard the sound of vehicles coming up the driveway. My parents froze. You expecting company? Dad asked, looking suddenly nervous. Might be, Grandpa said, vaguely getting up to look out the window. It's just my lawyer and your Uncle Steve. Told them to stop by today. The look on my parents' faces was pure panic. Mom actually went pale. Your lawyer? Why would you need your lawyer today? Always good to have professional advice when signing important documents. Don't you think Grandpa said, heading to the door? I followed him partly to help greet people and partly because I didn't want to be left alone with my parents who were having some kind of silent freakout behind us. Grandpa opened the door as they were coming up the steps. The lawyer and Uncle Steve looked pissed off already. We all headed back to the living room where my parents were frantically trying to gather up their papers. My sister was just sitting there looking confused, like the script had suddenly changed and nobody gave her the new pages. What's going on? Dad asked, trying to sound casual. Steve, what are you doing here? And who's this? He nodded at the lawyer. This is my attorney, Grandpa said. Been handling my affairs for about 30 years now. Your attorney. Mom was confused as hell, shooting Dad a panicked look. Well, Grandpa said, sitting down calmly in his armchair, when someone tries to steal my ranch through forged documents, it seems like a good time to have legal counsel present. Oh dear, he just came right out and said it. No build-up, no drama, just boom, I know what you're doing. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a mouse fart. Dad's face did this weird thing where it couldn't decide if it should look outraged or confused, so he just looked constipated instead. What are you talking about? He finally sputtered. Steal your ranch. These are just estate planning documents for your benefit. Uncle Steve snorted. Cut the crap, David. We've seen the papers. We know about the developer offering millions for this land. You think your dad's some senile old fool you can trick into signing away his property? Mom jumped in her voice going all high. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help organize things for Dad's future. Why are you attacking us like this? The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps you'd like to explain why these estate planning documents transfer full ownership of the ranch to you and your wife with no consideration or compensation to Mr. Mitchell, or why they grant you power of attorney effective immediately, or why there are practice signatures in your handwriting attempting to mimic your father's signature. Dad's face went from red to white real quick. Where did you get that? Who's been going through our personal papers? He turned to look at me, and I could see the exact moment he figured it out. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead right there. You, he hissed. You went through our office. You took photos of private documents, your own parents. I stood my ground even though my legs felt like jelly. Yeah, I did, because you're trying to rob Grandpa. What was I supposed to do, help you? My sister finally spoke up, looking confused and pissed. Wait, what's happening, Dad? What's he talking about? Were we really here to get Grandpa to sign over the ranch? At least she wasn't totally in on it, just willing to be the distraction without asking questions. Not sure if that's better or worse. Dad ignored her, still glaring at me. After everything we've done for you. I actually laughed, like a real laugh that surprised even me. Everything you've done for me? You mean making me pay rent to live in my own house, working me to death while you paid for her every whim, treating me like I was nothing? Yeah, thanks for all that. Mom started crying because of course she did her go-to move when confronted. How can you say such things? We're your parents. We love you. No, I said quietly. You don't. And now everyone knows exactly what kind of people you really are. Uncle Steve looked like he wanted to punch my dad, which honestly I wouldn't have minded seeing. You were going to sell your own father's ranch out from under him for what? A bigger house? A new car? You make me sick. Grandpa was just sitting there watching it all unfold with this calm sadness. Finally he spoke. I always taught you that a man's word is his bond, David. That honesty matters more than money. Seems those lessons didn't stick. Dad started backpedaling hard. Look, this is all a misunderstanding. These documents aren't what they seem. We were just trying to make sure our daughter has every opportunity. Her future depends on it. Save it, the lawyer interrupted. I've been practicing law for 40 years. I know a fraudulent scheme when I see one. The question is what your father wants to do about it. Everyone turned to look at Grandpa. He sighed, looking suddenly tired and old. What I want is for you all to leave now. Take your papers and go. Dad looked stunned. You're kicking us out. Your own son. You made your choice, Grandpa said simply. Now I'm making mine. Mom was full-on ugly crying now. Please, you can't do this. We're your family. We just wanted to help. Uncle Steve stepped forward. You heard him. Get your stuff and get out. My sister looked around frantically. What about me? I didn't do anything. You were helping them, I pointed out. You knew something was up and went along with it. She looked at me like I'd betrayed her, which was rich considering what was happening. I didn't know. They just said we needed to help Grandpa organize his affairs. Maybe she really didn't know, or maybe she was just better at playing innocent than I thought. Either way, Grandpa wasn't having it. All of you, he repeated. I need time to think about this. My parents reluctantly started gathering their things, Mom still crying, Dad looking like he was plotting his next move. My sister was texting frantically, probably telling her friends some BS version of events where she was the victim. And me, I just stood there feeling weirdly empty. This should have felt like victory, but it mostly felt sad. As they headed for the door, Dad turned back to me, his face twisted in anger. I suppose you think you're very clever turning your grandfather against us? Hope you're proud of yourself. Not proud, I said, keeping my voice steady. Just couldn't let you do it. He stared at me, eyes cold. You're not my son anymore. I don't ever want to see your face again. The words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. I just looked him dead in the eye. Good, because I'm done trying to be. That was the last thing I said to him. And that's how I ended up living at my grandpa's horse ranch, just like that. My parents and sister drove off all pissed, and I stayed behind. Not gonna lie, those first few days were weird as heck. Like, did I really just nuke my entire family? Yeah, they were shitty people trying to scam my grandpa, but still, they were my family. That kind of messes with your head no matter how you look at it. Grandpa gave me the small bedroom at the end of the hall. I swear it felt more like my space in one day than my room at my parents' house did in 17 years. After my parents left, the lawyer dude hung around talking with Grandpa about legal precautions and stuff, basically making sure my parents couldn't try some other sneaky business to get the ranch. Uncle Steve offered to drive back to my parents' place with me to get my stuff, but honestly, there wasn't much I gave a crap about. I can buy new stuff, I told him. Didn't really want to see them right now or ever, but I didn't say that part out loud. Uncle Steve nodded like he totally got it. Your grandpa's got money put away. He's not rich, but comfortable. He'll make sure you're good. The idea that someone wanted to take care of me without making me feel like a burden was weird as hell, like a completely foreign concept in my life. After everyone left, it was just me and Grandpa. We sat on the porch that evening, watching the horses in the pasture. Neither of us were big talkers, so we just sat in silence for a while, which was actually pretty nice. Then he turned to me. So what's your plan now? You want to finish high school out here? Got a decent school in town? Nothing fancy, but they teach you what you need to know. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. All my focus had been on stopping the scam. I guess so, not sure what else to do. He nodded. You can stay here as long as you want. Work the ranch with me, go to school, figure out your next steps. No rush, no demands for rent, no constant reminders that I was a burden. Just an open invitation to exist in a space where I was actually welcome. A very wild concept. What about college, I asked. My parents made it pretty clear they weren't paying for anything. Grandpa actually laughed. Kid, I might live in the middle of nowhere, but I'm not broke. I've been setting aside college money for you since you were born. Your dad never asked about it and I never offered. Figured he'd hit me up when it was time. Guess he found another way to try to get my money. I just stared at him. You have college money for me just sitting there all this time? Yep. Not enough for some fancy private school, but enough for state university if that's what you want. Or trade school or whatever else you decide to do. I felt like someone had slapped me, but in a good way. All those extra shifts, all that stress about how I'd pay for college, and this whole time there was money waiting for me. Just another thing my parents had kept from me. The next couple weeks were basically ranch life 101. Up at ass o'clock in the morning, feeding horses, mucking stalls, fixing fences. Hard physical work that left me sore as hell in muscles I didn't know existed. But it felt good, you know? Like I was doing something real, something that actually mattered. Grandpa was chill about teaching me stuff. He didn't get pissed when I screwed up, just showed me the right way and let me try again. Horses can sense when you're stressed, he'd say. They feed off your energy. Stay calm, they stay calm. About a week after everything went down, my phone blew up with texts. My parents had finally realized I wasn't coming back and were in full manipulation mode. Mom sent these long, dramatic messages about how much she loved me and how I was destroying the family. Dad was more direct. You've made a huge mistake. Don't expect us to bail you out when this falls apart. I didn't respond to any of it. What was the point? They'd shown me exactly who they were. My sister's messages were straight up nasty. Hope you're happy out there with the horses while my future is screwed. You ruined everything. Then it turned into blaming. You just couldn't let Mom and Dad handle things. Could you? You had to blow it all up. She wasn't asking if it was true. She was looking for someone to blame, and that was me. Why would you do this to them, to me? Like I was the one who started the scam. I finally sent her one message. Ask them about the developer offering millions for the land. See if they tell you the truth. Never heard back after that. Guess she got her answer, or maybe just didn't want to face it. Word got around to the extended family about what went down. Most took Grandpa's side, especially after they heard about the forged documents. A few blamed me for causing trouble and disrespecting my parents. Uncle Steve told them where they could shove their opinions. I liked that dude more and more. Starting at the local high school was weird. Small town, everyone knew everyone. And then there was me, the new kid with an interesting backstory. I made a few friends. Nothing super deep, but enough to avoid eating lunch alone. Grandpa introduced me to the ranch's clients, telling them I was his new ranch hand and learning the ropes. A month in, he sat me down with a stack of papers and said it was time to learn the business side of things. Turns out, the ranch wasn't just about riding horses and feeding them hay. It was legit work. Money coming in from lessons, trail rides, boarding fees, and a breeding program. Plus, there was over 200 acres of land that developers were eyeing like it was gold. By senior year, I was basically running the place. School during the day, ranch work mornings and evenings, weekends packed with lessons and trail rides. My parents tried reaching out, but I ignored them. Uncle Steve kept me updated on the family drama, but I didn't care. After graduation, Grandpa and I expanded the business, built an indoor arena, started a therapy program, and actually doubled our income in 2 years. 5 years later, it's wild thinking about how it all went down. The ranch seriously saved my life. Now I'm running the whole thing. Grandpa helps here and there, but at 75, he's mostly kicking back while I handle the day-to-day. We've got 8 employees. The therapy program helps dozens of kids every month, and last year we even hosted some small rodeos that pulled in good money. My parents tried showing up unannounced last Christmas, probably hoping to guilt their way back now that the ranch is worth more. Uncle Steve was visiting and straight up told them to get off the property or he'd call the sheriff. Most satisfying thing ever. Grandpa says I saved the ranch, but we both know it saved me. Funny how that works. My parents spent years making me feel like nothing, but I was the only one who stood up and stopped their crap. That's worth more than any inheritance.